Join as we learn Chumash for Thursday, Parshas Vayikra, chapter 4, verse 1 in the book of Leviticus. Yesterday we discussed about the parts that had to be brought as a sacrifice from the peace offering. And up until now we discussed about the different sacrifices that were brought voluntarily. Today we begin to discuss about sacrifices that were obligatory, whether it's the guilt offering or the sin offering, or the sin offering for an individual, sin offering for an anointed Kohen. Each one of these different sacrifices which had to be brought for a specific reason that the person was then obligated to bring a sin offering. Chapter 4, verse 1. Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe Lamer, and God spoke to Moses saying, verse 2, Daber el bnei Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people, Lamer saying, Nefesh kisechta, if a person sins, transgresses, bishgaga, unintentionally, mikol mitzvahs Hashem, of any of the passive commandments of God, asher lo yasena, that he committed only part of them, va'osa me'achas mehen, and he only did part of them, then what asher lo yasena, which are passive commandments, va'osa me'achas mehen, and he only did part of them, well then he is liable to bring a sin offering, as Rashi explains as follows. Mikol mitzvahs Hashem. What does it mean of all the mitzvahs of God? Pirshu Rabbi Seinu, the rabbis explained, Ein chatas ba el al davar shesdeini la v'karis, that the only time that a sin offering was brought was only in a sin that the Torah talks about, that such a sin, the person's punishment for doing it intentionally, he would either get, which is considered a negative commandment, and thereby receive the punishment of dying prematurely. Then in such a case, shigigasei, if he does it unintentionally, chatas, he would have to bring a sin offering. But something which there was no, if he did it intentionally, would not have that punishment. So for example, in other cases where we talk about there's different sins, which is a positive commandment, a negative commandment, or something which doesn't, there's something that has on it the punishment of the capital punishment by the Bezdin, in any of those cases, a person would not bring a chatas, a sin offering, for doing it unintentionally. Me'achas mehina, what does the word me'achas mehina mean? From one of them, or part of them. So Rashi explains, mikta achas mehan, even if he only did part of it. Kigoyin, for example, hakois of b'Shabbos, if somebody has the intention to write on Shabbos and he wants to write an entire word shimin, but he only wrote shame, the first two letters, which is shame, or noyach minochar, the word noyach from nochar, don midaniel, which these two letters, even though they're not a complete, what he intended to write, but they are a complete word on their own. So therefore he is liable for that obligation as sin offering. However, to be considered a liable obligation if he did it intentionally, to be liable to get capital punishment, that he did not get it, because since he has to be warned and all the different things that come together with it. However, in this case, does have the punishment of dying prematurely, so therefore he would be liable to bring a sin offering for it. Verse 3. The sin offering, now we come to circumstances which differ between a regular person or if it's a high priest or an anointed person, a member of the Sanhedrin. Im koyin hamashiach yechata, if the anointed high priest commits the same sin, la'ashmas ha'am, it implicates the people, because the Sanhedrin took responsibility, they were the Supreme Court of the Jewish people. V'hikriv al chatosei, therefore he would then have to bring an atonement for his sin, asher chata, that he sinned, par ben bakar, he has to then bring an unblemished young bull, tamim, unblemished, Lashem, to God, chatas, as a sin offering. Rashi explains, what does this mean? If the anointed Kohen would sin, it implicates the people. Midrashi, it means that the Torah is coming to tell us that the rules pertaining the obligation of a sin offering by the high priest are different than they are by everybody else. He only is obligated to bring a sin offering if he forgot what the actual ruling is, and he ruled on something which is prohibited and said that is permitted. What happens if it was also this mistake came along with shigigas maisa, meaning that they also, not only did he make the mistake for himself, but people acted according to his ruling. The Kemosh Nemer, as it says, La'ashmas, he implicated the people. V'nelam davar meini akol, and it was concealed from the people, from the eyes, meaning from the Sanhedrin. They said the wrong ruling. So then, therefore, not only did he make a mistake for himself, but then he realized he made a mistake for himself, but also people followed according to it. That's the pshuti. That's a simple interpretation. I'm sorry, that's according to the Medrash. The simple interpretation is that when a Kohen Gadol sins, when the high priest sins, this implicates in the people because it is the obligation of because the Jewish people are dependent on the Kohen Gadol, that he should atone for them and pray for them. And now that because of them, that they're doing something wrong, is nasa mekulkol, he does something wrong by mistake, unintentionally, that means he needs to have that forgiveness and that atonement. Because of this, it weakens the entire Jewish people as well, and it doesn't allow him to atone for the people. Par, what does he have to bring? A young bull. Ben Bakar, it says a young bull. Yochel, I would think, Zakin, it can bring even an older bull. Talmud Lemer, Ben, it has to be a young one. Katan, if it has to be a young one, Yochel, Katan, I can think it can be a very small one, for a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old. Talmud Lemer, Par, it still has to be considered a bull. So how do I get that it's an old one and a young one at the same time? Haketzad, it's a Par Ben Shalish, this is a bull that's 3 years old, in its 3rd year. It's not considered old, it's not considered young, it's someplace in between. Verse 4, and he'll bring then this bull to the entrance of the tent of meeting. Then he must, and he Lifnei Hashem in front of God, and will lean his hands on the head of the bull, and will slaughter the bull Lifnei Hashem in front of God. Verse 5, and the anointed priest then must take the blood. Midam, apart from the blood of the bull, and he'll bring it inside the tent of meeting. What's al oil moed? Rashi explains. Lamishkan, he brings it into the holy temple, the tabernacle, and in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, Beis Elamim, he will bring it into Elahechal. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash, it meant that he brought it inside the actual sanctuary itself. V'tovel hakoyin es etzboi b'adam, and then verse 6, and the Kohen would then dip his finger into the blood. V'chiza min adam, while he's in the tabernacle itself, in the actual sanctuary, in the holy temple. That's when he would dip his finger into the blood. V'chiza min adam sheva pamim, he would sprinkle from the blood 7 times. L'fnei Hashem, in front of God. That means towards the holy part of the curtain that would separate the sanctuary from the Holy of Holies. That's where he would sprinkle that blood. Rashi, meaning keneged mokim kedushasa, towards the place of holiness, and the part of that it's holy. Mechuvin keneged beis habadim, you would have to intentionally try to sprinkle the blood that it should land between, where it would be directly in between the 2 poles that were protruding into the curtain, so you knew where the 2 poles were. However, the blood but the blood would not touch the actual curtain. But if they happened to touch the curtain, it wasn't a big error, it wasn't considered a prohibition, but technically speaking, he tried that it shouldn't touch the actual curtain. Verse 7. Then afterwards the priest, the Kohen, would then place some of the blood on the 4 protrusions of the incense altar. Lifnei Hashem, in front of God, Asher ba'oil made, that was in the sanctuary. V'eskol hadam hapar yishpech l'yiseid mizbach ha'olah. The rest of the blood he would then take and pour it out by the base of the altar of the ascent offering, which was in the courtyard of the altar of the holy temple, or by the courtyard of the tabernacle. Asher pesach ha'oil made, which was at the opening, at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Verse 7, V'eskol adam. What does it mean, all the blood? Shiyarei adam. That means the leftover blood, being that some of the blood he already used to sprinkle in front of the curtain. Whatever was left, he would then go and pour at the base of the outer altar. Verse 8. V'eskol chelav parachatas yareh mimenu. And then he will then he must remove all the sin offerings bull fat, the fat from it. The yarim mimenu shall remove from it as a chelev hamechasa lakerev, the fat that was covering on the innards, as a kol chelev asher al lakerev, and all the fats that was on the innards itself. He would then take it off, which we would talk about. Maybe it's the small intestine and all the different innards that he would have to remove to be able to bring it onto the altar. Rashi, Kol chelav par, chel boy hoyalemer. Technically, it should have said chel boy, because we know it's about a bull, so she should just say the fats of it. Talmatam lemer par. Why does it have to tell us again that it's a bull? The Rabbi's par shal Yom Kippurim. This includes that the bull that they would bring on Yom Kippur for an atonement. That when it says that one has to also bring the kidneys and the fats that was on the liver. Hachatas lahavi. And as well, from the word hachatas, I learned that he has to comes to include se'iri avodah zara. So too that any goats that were brought because of a sin that was done because of idol worship, as well, that has to be brought on the altar as well. And it comes to include lekloyes chalavim liseres, that the kidneys, the fats, and the piece of the liver as well. Yarim mimenu has to be removed from it. Why doesn't he say that if it already says Yasir, he has to remove it? Why does he have to say Yarim mimenu has to be uplifted and taken from it? So what does he mean to tell us? It's adding mina mechuber, that even the parts that he has to take off the fats that may be connected to the intestines, he shouldn't cut it before he removes the fats from it. And only after he removes the fats, then he can cut it out of the animal. It's learned B'Teiras Kainim. That's the way it's explained in Toras Kainim. Verse 9, V'shtei akloyis, and the two kidneys, v'sachela v'sharlein, and the fats that's on them, asher alaksalim, that's on the flanks of it, he must remove as well. V'sayisedus alakavid, and the diaphragm, along with the kidneys, and along with the parts of the liver, alakloyis isirenu, he should remove them. So not only the flanken that are the sides of the kidneys and the fats that's on the diaphragm of the liver, as well as on the kidneys, all have to be removed. Verse 10, Kasher Yura Misher Zevach Hashlamim, the same way that all these fat parts were removed from the bull that was a peace offering. And so too the Kohen brought them as a sacrifice on the ascent altar, as the ascent offering. So too was the sin offering. Verse 10, Kasher Yuram. Why does the Torah tell me like it was done by the peace offering? The same way those pieces that were cut off and they were brought, and it's explained by the peace offering. The question is, didn't he just enumerate it the same way? He already enumerated it by the peace offering. So why does the Torah have to tell me, just like you did by the peace offering, you're going to do it here? If the Torah just enumerated all the sections like he did by the peace offering. Elo, it's coming to say, La kishe l'shlamim. It's coming to compare it to the peace offering. Ma shlamim lishman, just like the peace offering had to be for the sake of a peace offering, avzel lishmai, so too this is for God. This becomes a sacrifice for God, and the person has to have the intent that it is being brought as a sacrifice for God. As well, another explanation, Ma shlamim shalim be'elam, just like by the peace offering we explained that it's called peace because it brings peace into the world. So too, even though it may be a sin offering, but it's bringing peace into the world by the very fact that the people are being atoned for their sins. When it comes to the slaughtering of these holy animals, the verse needs to tell us about the general rule. Being that generally we don't learn from one fact to another when it comes to the holy items and the sacrifices, and therefore the Torah has to tell us clearly, and it's going to tell us by all the different types of sin offerings and peace offerings. It will enumerate all the different details about that sacrifice, because we don't learn, though, and generally throughout the Torah we can learn one rule from another rule. However, when it comes to the idea of these holy items, which were the sacrifices that were brought, generally we will not learn from one verse to another, and each one is a standalone Torah reading, and that's why you'll notice over here these three sections tell us about the three different kinds of sin offerings that are discussed. All these different terminologies, Kula and Lishas and Tesefes, these are all an extra muvad. That means besides all the things that he may have, the liver, the kidneys, telling us everything that you have. Not that you're putting them one on top of the other, but this one and another one and another one, that you should make sure you have all of them as well. Verse 12. Verse 11. And the skin of the bull's hide, and all its flesh, al roishiv al krov, its head and its legs, and vikirbe and its innards, upirshei and its waste matter. He must take then the entire bull, all this that we just mentioned, and take it outside the camp, to a clean place, to a pure place. Al Shefech Hadeshen, to the place outside the camp, which was considered as a ash depository, as will be explained later as well. The Sarah Faisin will be burnt, Al Eitzim Ba'esh, on wood and fire, Al Shefech Hateshem, in this ash depository that was there, even if there happens to be that there's no ashes, as we'll soon see, Yisaref, they all should be burnt. Rashi explains as follows. Al Makim Toir, being that there were places outside the city that were also there to put the impure items, for example, let's say if they were taking down a home that had tzaras, and they had to then take those stones and take it out to a place, they were impure, and they also had to be taken outside the year. Or Levesak Faris, or to the cemetery was outside the city. Therefore, he says clearly, therefore the pasuk has to tell me, when I tell you now to take it outside the camp, I'm not talking about, or outside the city, there has to be a place which is clean, which is pure, not where the place where the cemetery is, or where they placed all those stones or that became contaminated as well. Outside the camp, meaning chutz l'shalish machnas. We know that there were three camps that the Jewish people sat in. The inner camp, which was machane kohuna, where the actual tabernacle was. Then there was the perimeter, which was machane levia, which was the Levites' camp. And then around that was the machane Yisrael, which where the rest of the Jewish people stayed. When it says take it outside the camp, it has to be taken outside all the three camps, not just in the machane Yisrael. When it came time in the Holy Temple, where did they take it? Then there wasn't the camps. Then Chutz La'ir, they had to take it outside the city of Jerusalem, which that was considered as outside the three camps. Commissioner Beshur Rabbi Seidim B'Msechta Yuma, like the rabbis explain in the tractate of Yuma and Sanhedrin. El Shefech Hadeshem, what does it mean? The ash depository. That means every single day they would clean off the ash from the altar and they would put it on the side of the altar. Then they would have to take all that ash and take it to another place. And that was the place that they would take it and put all the ash. They would have to take all the ash, bring it outside the camp, and there was a place that they would keep all the ash. So therefore he says, you take these things as well and bring it to that area. Why does the Torah have to say and repeat itself again? It should be placed on the ash depository, even though over there may not be ash, because for whatever reason there is no ash. Still, that's the area that you're going to put all the leftovers of this animal. Verse 13. Now we're coming to a case where the sin offering of the Sanhedrin. If the Sanhedrin, who is now considered the entire community of the Jewish people, make a mistake, v'nelam davar, and this is because the correct decision of the matter eluded them. They did not say the correct answer. V'nelam davar me'ne'akol, and the matter eluded them from the eyes of the community. The eyes of the community referring to the leaders of the community. V'asu achas mikol mitzvos Hashem, and they transgressed any of these passive commandments. Asher lo yisayasena, that should have not been done, as we mentioned, these positive commandments. Then v'ashemu, they are incurring a guilt. Rashi, what does this mean? Adas Yisrael, who is this considered the community of the Jewish people? So Rashi explains, Elu Sanhedrin, this refers to the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court of the Jewish people. V'nelam davar, it eluded them. Lahoides ba'achas mikol krisa shabatayra shuhu muter. That means they made a mistake in one of the things in the Torah, which the punishment is a premature death, and they said that something that's prohibited, that they said that it's permitted. Hakol va'asu, she'asu tzibur al piyim, that not only did they make the mistake of saying this law, but also everybody followed according to what they said. Then, when the sin that they have committed has been discovered, the yikrivu akol, then the community must bring par ben bakar, a young bull, lechatas as a sin offering, and they will bring it before the tent of God. Verse 15. Then the elders of the community will lean their hands on the head of the bull, in front of God, and they will slaughter this bull in front of Hashem. Verse 16, then this blood would be received in a vessel. The anointed Kohen would bring some of the bull's blood and he would bring it into the tent of meeting. And we learned that if this would happen in the time of the temple, he would bring it into the sanctuary. Then while standing in the sanctuary, then the Kohen would dip his finger into the blood. He's a sheva pamin, would sprinkle 7 times l'fnei Hashem in front of God, in front of the curtain where the poles were protruding of the ark. Let's see in Rashi, espnei pareches. Over here it does not say hakodesh, the holy curtain. L'mayla, however, he says espnei areches hakodesh, the holy curtain. What's the reason why over here he calls it, does not say the holy curtain in front of the holy tablets? This is an example for a king who his kingdom went against him. If some of the people made a mistake, did something wrong, at least he has his own people, his own entourage. They're all with him, they're all on his side. However, but if everybody did something wrong, that means he doesn't anymore want to be with his entourage, his ministers, his parliament, his government. What are they worth? Because since everybody's doing everything wrong. Afkan, so too, when the only one that did something wrong was the anointed Kohen, then there's still the name of the holiness on the holy sanctuary. But over here, in this case, when everybody followed what they said, that the whole Sanhedrin made a mistake and all the Jewish people did something wrong, then you got a bigger problem. God forbid to say that now the God's holiness has now gone away. And therefore he only calls it pareiches, the curtain, but does not say the holy curtain. After he finishes sprinkling the blood, he puts also some blood on the protrusions of the altar Hashem that's in the holy temple, that's in the tent of meeting. And the leftover blood, he pours out at the base of the ascent altar, which is the outside, at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Yesod Maravi, where he would do this was at the western part of the altar, which this was directly opposite the entrance of the tent of meeting of the tabernacle. Verse 19, he must then separate all its fat from it, and then burn it up on the outside altar. Verse 19, even though over here he doesn't explicitly say which fat and what kind of fat, still in all, we learn it being in the next verse, it's going to say in verse 20, and they'll do to this bull like they did by the other bull. Therefore, we know that the same was done. Why over here? Why doesn't he explain clearly, decisively what should be done? The teachings of the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael learned, imagine a king which his own friend disappointed him, and therefore he's upset at his friend. However, he doesn't want to detail all the pain and suffering that his friend caused him. So therefore, the Torah in this way as well, because he loves the Jewish people as well, doesn't detail what to do when it comes to a disappointing time that all the Jewish people may have sinned against God. Verse 20. Verse 19, verse 20, and he will do to this bull like he did to the bull of the sin offering. So too will do to this one. And the Kohen will be as an atonement for them, and they will be forgiven. Rashi, like he did to the sin offering, like we explained, as it's explained, by the bull for the anointed Kohen and what he did wrong. And this includes that he has to bring the diaphragm and the 2 kidneys and Shapir Shama Shalepidish Kan. That over there he explains, but he doesn't go explicitly here. This is because when it comes to the fact that he duplicates the idea and the mitzvah when it comes to giving the blood in the different places, and why does he duplicate that? Meaning, if the Torah wanted to tell us do the same as you did by the Kohen. He could have said it by everything. Why does he enumerate how he sprinkles the blood, but doesn't enumerate the different fats that had to be brought? And Rashi explains this is because Lalamed that if he missed out doing any of these sprinklings of the blood, pasul would be considered unfit and invalid. Because we do find by those sin offerings where the blood was sprinkled on the outside altar that if one person just did it in one shot, then it's considered an atonement. And therefore over here, he says, that if when a regular sin offering, if a person does it on the outside altar in one shot, the Kohen does it, it's considered fine. However, when it comes to these sacrifices, these are unique, that they have to have the exact description they have to follow. It cannot be all done at once, and therefore it has to be 7 times, and only that way is it a valid sin offering for atonement. Verse 21, and then he will take out the bull outside the camp, and will burn it, the same way he burnt the first bull, this is considered a sin offering of the community. Verse 22. We now go to the next communal type of sin offering, and this is of a leader. So we had of the Sanhedrin, we had of an anointed Kohen, and now we come to a leader. Asher nasi yechata, if a leader of the Jewish people sins unintentionally, va'osa achas mikol mitzvahs Hashem, and he doesn't transgresses any of the passive commandments of God, asher lo yisei asena, where he should, asher lo yisei asena, which was, as we mentioned, it was a passive commandment, bishgaga, this was unintentional, va'oshem, and therefore he bears guilt because of it, incurring guilt. 22, asher nasi yechta. Why does the Torah use this terminology when asher, or if asher? The word asher in this case can also come from the word ashrei, lucky. Ashrei ader shanasi shaloi nesin leiv lahavi kalpare asher kigase. Lucky is the generation that a leader realizes that he did something wrong and he needs to ask for atonement for something that he's done wrong. How much more so if he gives attention and gives heed to things that he did intentionally, and he recognizes to do teshuvah for them, how lucky that generation is for somebody that has that humility to come to recognize that they've done something wrong. Oy hoida, or the sin that he committed was made known. Elav chatasi, the sin that he done, asher chata, that he committed. But with it, v'hevias karbani will bring a sacrifice. It's going to be a goat, zachar, a male, tamim, unblemished. Oy hoida, what does it mean? Or it was known. Im hoida hadavar. If people found out about it, that means it got known. Harbe oyesh masham shemaloshin im ve'im bimkam oy. We find the word oy can be also transferable or used interchangeable with the word im, if. Like oy noida kisher nagachu, like we learned in the book of Exodus, or if it was known that he became a goring ox as well. Hoida elav. Kishachata, what does it mean it was known to him? Kishachata yisav shu heter, because when he sinned, he thought it was okay. He thought it was permissible. And only afterwards did he find out that this that he did was prohibited. Verse 24. He'll lean his hands on the head of the goat. He'll slaughter it in the place where the Ola offering is slaughtered. Hashem in front of God. This is a sin offering. Rashi. What's the place that the Ola offering was done? Tzafin, that was in the north, like we explained by the ascent offering. Chatasu, what does it mean? It is a sin offering, meaning he has to make sure that it's done lishmai for the intent of a sin offering, then kasher it's fit. Shaloi lishmai, but if the offering was done not for the proper intent, that means he thought it's just a regular donation, he didn't want to clearly, explicitly state that it's being brought as a sin offering, then pasul, it's unfit and it's not considered a proper sacrifice. Verse 25. And the Kohen will then take from the blood of the sin offering with his finger, and he will put it on the corners of the Ola altar, which is the outside altar, and its blood, the rest of its remaining blood, will be poured at the base of the altar. Rashi tells us this was the remaining blood. Verse 26, and all its fats will be then brought on the altar, just like the fats that was brought by the peace offering. And then the Kohen will atone him from his sin, and he will then be forgiven. Rashi says, just like those pieces that were explained, that when a person brings a sin offering that's a goat, what pieces are brought up on the altar, ha'omer itzal shlamim that are mentioned by the peace offering, so too by the sin offering would be the exact same pieces. This concludes the Torah reading for Thursday, Parshas Vayikra.